Blessings of the day and the story just given by Sister Leacock. So good evening. We start as usual with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, as we go into our health talk, we thank you for the information on health that you have given to us as a people. Bless us and strengthen mind and body. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So welcome and good evening. We are going to be talking about brain health this afternoon, a topic we have to come to over and over again, brain health. In fact, a recent discovery, or rather awareness, I'm going to mention now, we have always thought that the brain, in terms of utilization of insulin, didn't have the same requirement for insulin receptors as other tissues. And in fact, although it was known that there are some insulin receptors in some parts of the brain, nothing much was thought of it in the past in terms of the physiology and biochemistry of the brain. But recently, new interest has been awakened in the knowledge that there are these receptors for insulin in the brain. And researchers are finding out that in the mammalian brain and the human brain, these receptors not only play a role in helping the areas of the brain where they're found to use glucose, but also play an important role in maintaining what is called the plasticity of neurons, brain nerve cells, and also protecting the brain from degeneration. That is interesting. And it helps to explain why people with insulin resistance, pre-diabetes, and diabetes are more at risk for the development of Alzheimer's disease, for example. So this is an insulin receptor understanding in the brain, taking on new dimensions of understanding, and people looking to do more research in it. So insulin resistance, therefore, not only affects liver and pancreas and muscle and adipose tissue, but insulin resistance also impacts negatively on the brain. Now, we already know that overindulgence, the modern refined processed foods, both carbs and meats, as well as saturated fat and lack of exercise, are the three major contributors to the development of what we call insulin resistance. And insulin resistance is when the hormone insulin, when it fits into its receptor, cannot get its work done of enhancing the transport of glucose from the blood into the cells. Something goes wrong with the receptor and the post-receptor mechanism. So insulin isn't getting its work done, though it is present. And the pancreas then produces more insulin, trying to get the work done, but the work still isn't done. So the person who is pre-diabetic may actually have higher than normal levels of insulin, but that insulin can't get its work done of enhancing the transport of glucose into cells. And this higher level of insulin simply promotes further obesity, a vicious cycle or a vicious spiral in which more insulin, more obesity, more insulin resistance, more insulin, and it creates, of course, as well, chronic systemic inflammation. And this insulin resistance means that, therefore, the few insulin receptors in certain parts of the brain will not be working properly either, and would interfere with glucose transport in those areas, but more importantly, the role of those receptors, which is now attracting a lot of research. We don't know a lot about them, but the role of those receptors in maintaining the plasticity and the health of brain cells and preventing inflammatory damage, that role will be impaired if there is insulin resistance. So obesity, insulin resistance, prediabetes, all impact, therefore, on brain health. And as we go on, we will notice some important things. So some of the ways to improve those receptor functions, insulin receptor functions in the brain would be similar to elsewhere in the body: exercise, physical exercise, and mental exercise. Physical exercise, very important. Eliminating unhealthy saturated fats from the diet and eating, rather than refined processed foods, whole food, whole and natural. Also, in looking at whole food, whole, people nowadays eat a lot of refined processed carbohydrates. We've come to understand that eating the whole, natural, complex carbohydrates, eating those, that is much healthier. For example, take sweet potatoes and green bananas. Sweet potatoes contain a starch that we call a resistant starch, high in fiber, slowly digested, the glucose slowly absorbed, and it has been shown that that kind of complex resistant starch, for example, in sweet potatoes, green bananas, is very good for carbohydrate health and metabolism, preventing any sudden spike after a meal and helping to keep the sugar levels at an even balance. And the fiber produces good food for the gut bacteria, and they produce other molecules that also help in the regulation of carbohydrate metabolism. So sweet potatoes, and you have not only the white flesh sweet potatoes and the yellow flesh sweet potatoes, but the purple flesh sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes are rich in fiber, reduce the risk of colon cancer, rich in antioxidants, and have this kind of what we call resistant starch, which has been shown to be healthy for the gut bacteria and healthy for carbohydrate metabolism. And it helps to reduce insulin resistance. So in terms of brain health, the awareness that has increased recently in the investigation of these insulin receptors in certain parts of the brain and their relationship to neurodegenerative diseases. If a person has insulin resistance, prediabetes or diabetes, that awareness has led to other areas of research and study. And take, for example, we've now come to understand that intermittent fasting, which is like eating 2 meals a day separated by 8 hours, and then a long 16-hour period when you eat nothing at all. When that happens, intermittent fasting, the brain cells have to switch to the use of fat, for example, and that gives them a chance in switching from the use of glucose to the use of fat and then having to switch back. It has been shown that that switch from one to the other and then back improves the insulin receptor function in the brain, number one, and improves brain health, number two. Also, intermittent fasting or even longer periods of fasting allow brain cells to regenerate when I say, let me put it this way, undergo what we call autophagy, get rid of waste, help to recycle stuff, rest, restore, and also in certain areas of the brain, fasting can help the regeneration of certain neurons, a thing we didn't think of in the past, but we now know that in certain areas of the brain, brain cells can actually regenerate, a thing unthought of up until recent research. And the amino acid taurine helps the regeneration of brain cells as well. So fasting is very good for the brain, and intermittent fasting very healthy for the brain. Helps those insulin receptors about which there has been an increased awareness recently, helps those insulin receptors to function better in the brain. And when they function better in the brain functions better overall. So intermittent fasting, eating whole food whole, and the resistant complex starches like in sweet potatoes, green bananas, and so on, much healthier for the brain than refined processed stuff and excessive refined sugars. So brain health is important because the World Health Organization and other health authorities predict that neurodegenerative diseases, Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and other neurodegenerative diseases are poised to really increase in incidence and prevalence, and they are serious diseases for which there's no known cure in medicine. So looking to prevent deterioration in brain health, looking to preserve brain health is an important dimension in primary prevention. Now, still in the area of insulin resistance, obesity, prediabetes, and diabetes, insulin resistance is a serious business. It predisposes to hypertension, diabetes, predisposes to worsening obesity. So obesity can cause insulin resistance, and insulin resistance can enhance further development of obesity, a vicious cycle. And insulin resistance also increases the risk of certain cancers. Insulin resistance and obesity can increase the risk in women of the uterine cancers, breast, so on. So insulin resistance is something we want to reverse. And the best way of reversing it is exercise, losing excess fat, eating less quantity, better quality, and avoiding the refined processed foods and eating whole, natural food whole. And also periods of intermittent or whole day fasting. All of that helps to reduce insulin resistance. Then there are some molecules that we know help. We've been talking recently about berberine. Berberine is a molecule under the microscope in terms of research, a very important natural molecule, berberine, and it has been shown clinically and biochemically to help reduce insulin resistance. And by the way, it is very good for the brain as well. It helps the healthy gut bacteria to multiply and improve and produce certain molecules that are good for the entire body, including the brain. So berberine, that we've talked about recently, along with intermittent fasting and high fiber foods, all good for the gut bacteria and good for the brain. Moving on to other foods that are brain healthy in the light of this new awareness of insulin receptors in certain areas of the brain, nuts are very brain healthy. And then the nuts, of course, walnuts still coming at number one in terms of brain health. Walnuts, antioxidants, fiber, alpha-linolenic acid, which is the plant-based omega-3, and vitamin E. And almonds and hazelnuts are rich in vitamin E, and they're also brain healthy because vitamin E is very good for the brain. Vitamin E is one of the best antioxidants for brain health. and it is best had naturally in the nuts. All nuts and seeds are vitamin E rich. For example, sunflower seeds are very rich in vitamin E, walnuts, hazelnuts, and almonds, and they contain mainly gamma vitamin E, which, though it is converted to alpha vitamin E, alpha tocopherol in the body, the gamma tocopherol, gamma vitamin E, has been shown to be very protective of organs, including the brain, breast, and prostate. So the nuts giving the natural vitamin E and the gamma form. It is not recommended that we take synthetic vitamin E, which is DL alpha tocopherol, and certain lines of research and studies have not given good reports on it either. But the natural vitamin E in your nuts and seeds, and if you're taking a supplement of vitamin E, make sure it is natural D alpha rather than DL. But vitamin E in your nuts and seeds, very good for the brain. Walnuts, almonds, hazelnuts, sunflower seeds, and in fact, all nuts in moderation are good for the brain. And seeds. Included in that list of seeds would be sesame, which contain powerfully anti-inflammatory substances, all good for the brain. In coming on from nuts and seeds, looking at legumes, the research is now clear that lentils and beans are super brain foods. Beans and lentils and beans, they're rich in the B vitamins, they contain folic acid and antioxidants, and some alpha linolenic acid. And also beans, like sweet potatoes and green bananas, contain what we call resistant nutrient-dense starch, which is slowly digested for a slow release of glucose, and that seems to definitely improve insulin sensitivity, that is, reverse insulin resistance in the brain. Lentils and beans, superfoods for the brain. And they're also good sources of protein. Rather than thinking you have to depend on animal flesh for protein, lentils and beans give good fiber, good protein, and certain nutrients in them are very brain healthy. The thing about lentils and beans is that the fiber also feeds the good, healthy gut bacteria and enhance their production of certain molecules they're now researching that are very good for the brain. Talking about seeds, we have to include here pumpkin seeds, very brain healthy, rich in magnesium, zinc, folic acid, omega-3, and fiber. And pumpkin seeds are good for overall health, not just for the male prostate, as is usually said, which is true, but good for the male and female and good for the brain. Eating pumpkin seeds have been shown to reduce the risk, for example, of pancreatic cancer and breast cancer. Pumpkin seeds. So we see these legumes and lentils, beans, pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, nuts, especially walnuts, almonds, hazelnuts, are all very good for the brain because of the vitamin E, because of the minerals, and because of helping to improve insulin sensitivity, or to put it in the corollary form, reverse insulin resistance. We know, as we have said before, that another class of food that would be extremely good for the brain would be the berries in the fruit class, all the berries, but especially blueberries. And a recent study I was just looking at by a group that criticizes and examines all research carefully to make sure it is worthy of being reported, a site called examine.com. They're saying that they just saw some recent research, which is high-ranking research on the how valuable blueberries, and we've talked about this before, blueberries are for the brain. And not only for the brain, but blueberries increase the elasticity, that is, reduce the stiffness of arteries, helping to lower blood pressure, make the arteries more flexible, improve blood flow, and also improve the plasticity of brain cells, and blueberries improve cognition, improve memory, help to prevent neurodegenerative diseases. Blueberries are very, very easily available and cheap in the North Atlantic jurisdictions, more expensive here because we have to buy them frozen and so on and import them. But you can get blueberry extract, you can get blueberry powder, you can get the blueberries in their frozen form, but it is an investment worth making for brain health. All the berries, especially blueberries, for good brain health. And also, they also included Concord grapes, which sometimes we don't mention. Concord grapes. And by the way, people think that some of these berries and grapes may interfere with blood sugar. They say that the fiber content and the antioxidants in these berries protect the carbohydrate metabolism, and they have found that they actually help to reduce the risk of diabetes type 2. Of course, if a person already has diabetes, they would have to monitor sweetness in any fruit within the overall intake of calories. But there's no evidence that berries, for example, and Concord grapes increase the risk of diabetes in a non-diabetic within a healthy context of exercise and healthy eating. But Concord grapes have also been included in this list of fruits or berries that protect the brain. And in terms of molecules in foods that protect the brain, a lot of research is looking at lycopene from tomatoes or the red guava and other lycopene sources, but tomatoes and tomato products. Lycopene has been shown, although there's a big molecule, a big aliphatic carotenoid, which is lipid soluble, to be able to pass the blood-brain barrier, get into the brain, and it helps to protect the brain from free radical damage, helps to keep the brain neurons plastic, and helps to prevent inflammation and the formation of the amyloid kind of plaque that is associated with neurodegenerative disorders such as Alzheimer's or the other kind of plaque associated with Parkinson's degeneration. So there you have it, lycopene. Lycopene is such a wonderful carotenoid, tomato paste, and is the richest source. Just have to make sure you use it out of a can that does not contain BPA. Just look at the can and you will see no BPA. That's the one to choose. If it doesn't say no BPA, forget that can and find one that says no BPA. BPA means bisphenol A, which is a dangerous hormone disruptor. But lycopene has been shown to be excellent for brain health as well. And two other carotenoids, lutein and zeaxanthin. Lutein from green leafy vegetables, zeaxanthin also from greens, but from corn as well. Lutein, zeaxanthin, and lycopene, very protective of brain health. Hence the importance of green leafy vegetables, as was mentioned before. Just to mention here a couple of supplements. The amino acid taurine, which is found in certain foods, is a sulfur-containing amino acid, which is a very cheap supplement, but it is good for heart and brain. And it has been shown to be one of the few molecules that helps the brain to actually rejuvenate and produce new brain cells. An idea not believed several decades ago, but now there is evidence for it. Taurine, the amino acid taurine, T-A-U-R-I-N-E, taurine, a sulfur-containing amino acid, which is also very good for bile salt formation by the liver. Taurine is good for heart, helps to prevent abnormal electrical disorders in the heart, and very good for the brain. Taurine. Just mentioning a few other supplements here. We have abundant evidence that grapeseed extract is such a good overall supplement for health. Brain, breast, colon, prostate, cardiovascular system, grapeseed extract, and research has shown that it helps to protect the brain. And another one called Gotu Kola. Has nothing to do with cola or caffeine, Gotu Kola. helps also to protect the brain. And of course, pycnogenol, which is the pine bark extract, abundant evidence of its brain protecting properties, and another bark called the magnolia plant extract. These have been shown with evidence and studies to be neuroprotective. Coming back now to our foods and herbs, the cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, kale, definitely brain protective for sure. And then in the roots, beets. Beets help in the production of nitric oxide. Beets contain their own nitrates, and that helps to improve blood flow, relax arteries, reduce arterial stiffness, and be good for the brain. And olive oil, also very healthy for the brain. And then in the herbs, turmeric, of course, a wealth of information on how good turmeric is, the active ingredient curcumin and the curcuminoids, how good they are for brain health. Turmeric, the spice, use the whole root, use the powder, use the extract, but turmeric, very good for brain health. Sage, another herb that is extremely good for brain health, has been traditionally known to be so, but studies have now confirmed that sage, good for brain health. In terms of foods, oats are also ranked as a top brain food. And that has to do with the fact that the oat bran contains beta-glucans, which not only boost the immune system, but are fibers that gut bacteria use to enhance their own health and to produce molecules that we are now researching more and more into that are very good for brain health. And of course, flaxseed, ground flaxseed. The flax contains alpha-linolenic acid, which is the plant form of omega-3, and that is always very good for the brain. So oats and flax, sage and turmeric, easily available food items that are very good for the brain indeed. We mentioned fasting before. Fasting helps the brain produce new neurons, and fasting helps the brain, all cells in the body, to go into what we call a survival and repair mode. When you eat less and fast, the cells go into a survival and repair mode where they recycle and get rid of a lot of waste, and they brace themselves to be able to survive. And that leads to what we know already as autophagy, but leads to rejuvenation and anti-aging effects. So fasting, calorie restriction in general, but intermittent and periods of fasting all contribute to anti-aging mechanisms, rejuvenating mechanisms, and repair, put the cells in a survival and repair mode. As Christians, we have the example of Jesus, who at the start of his ministry fasted 40 days and 40 nights, 40 days. We don't have to fast that length of time. He did it to win the victory for us as us. But the example is there of the importance of fasting, and that enabled him to brace for and to successfully overcome all the attacks of the enemy. And more research is showing the value of fasting on mental health, brain health, and physical health. Constantly gorging the system with food, just being a slave to appetite is not good for the health at all. Periods of intermittent fasting, a 2-meal-a-day regime, and periods of fasting, very good for overall health. And now the research is showing very good indeed for brain health as well. In addition, of course, adequate sleep is very good for the brain, and that hormone from the pineal gland, melatonin, very good for the brain. Of course, after a certain age, melatonin levels tend to fall off. and therefore supplementing with melatonin after as we age has also been shown to be very good for the brain. 5-10 milligrams melatonin half an hour before bedtime in aging people helps the aging brain, and of course helps. Melatonin is also a very powerful, a simple molecule, but a very powerful antioxidant, and is very good for overall brain health as well. And some researchers are looking at high dosages in cases of cancer prevention in aging populations. Sunlight not only produces vitamin D, and it brings us to vitamin D. Vitamin D is one of the most important vitamins the brain needs. The brain needs the B vitamins, of course, B1, B2, B3. The brain needs vitamin B12, of course. And a lot of older people may have problems absorbing vitamin B12. The best form of vitamin B12 is not the cyanocobalamin, but the methylcobalamin. And vitamin B12, very good for the brain. The B vitamin is very good for the brain. And then folic acid also, all very good for brain health. And these B vitamins help with the metabolism of brain cells, help with the insulin receptor function of the brain cells, and that is very good for brain health. But in terms of melatonin and sleeping, and now we are mentioning the importance of sunlight. Sunlight, of course, enhances vitamin D production, and we should understand that vitamin D is a very important vitamin for the brain. Vitamin D, it is now being shown from early in life, will help to reduce the risk of diabetes type 1 and multiple sclerosis, which is a debilitating disease of the brain. Vitamin D has been shown, clinical evidence, to reduce the risk of multiple sclerosis if there are adequate levels of vitamin D from early in life and higher and right on. So vitamin D also protects the brain, neuroprotection of the brain. Vitamin D, the vitamins B, B12, folic acid, and when you use your seeds and nuts and green leafy vegetables and wheat germ and so on, and your grains, you get vitamins B. And people who are vegan or vegetarian should supplement with a good form of vitamin B12 like methylcobalamin, vitamin B12. You can use the type that is absorbed under the tongue to escape, to enhance absorption and escape stomach mechanisms that may interfere with proper absorption. But B12 for the brain, vitamin D for the brain, the B vitamins, folic acid, sunlight for the brain. They're now showing that sunlight also is involved in other beneficial mechanisms other than just simply enhancing the skin's production of vitamin D. Mechanisms that are complex in the physical and biochemistry, that they're looking at just the sunlight on the skin, opening up certain pathways that are beneficial for overall health. Interesting area of new research as well. And I saw Professor C. Holt talking about that recently as well. So sunlight, vitamin D, vitamin E we mentioned, the B vitamins, folic acid, B12, all good for the brain, green leafy vegetables, the cruciferous vegetables, exercise in the open air and the sunlight. And some researchers are saying that what we're seeing nowadays compared to years before, we're seeing an increase in autoimmune diseases, we're seeing an increase in allergies, we're seeing an increase in asthma, compared to former years where children used to be allowed to run about in the sun. And nowadays, people are sitting down playing these games in a house all the time. The sitting is bad. The games they play are useless, and not getting the exercise in the open air and the sunlight. And the research is showing the link in terms of moving away from that lifestyle of playing and running about in the sun and not doing so now, and connecting it with changes we're seeing in the epidemiology of certain diseases. the brain is the most important of our organs in terms of what we are dealing with in spirituality. Every organ has its important role, but the brain is certainly the master organ, and we need to think and eat in terms of brain protection, preventing the neurodegenerative diseases. We are seeing Alzheimer's coming down the age group. It is frightening. People in the late 50s and 60s and so on developing Alzheimer's, quite alarming. And we need to know that anything can happen to anybody, anything, whatever you do, of course, but we should do our best to reduce risk in all of these areas. And we've looked at brain health this evening. We'll look at it some more when because it needs more time in certain areas, but looking at these basic principles, things we can do to enhance brain health and help to prevent the premature onset of neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. So thank you for listening to our talk on brain health. In a few minutes remaining, if there are any questions or things to share, you can do so in the few minutes remaining. So a question there, let me just read it. What are the effects of digestion on brain in relation to blood flow? I have to be sure I'm understanding what you're asking. After eating, more blood has to come down to the digestive tract for digestion and absorption. So there is some decrease in blood flow to other areas. I don't know if that's the line the person is asking. And that is why it is now we are now being told, according to a piece of new research, that after eating, well, we should never overindulge, but after eating, it is best to go for a gentle walk that helps to improve the blood flow to the organs. Eating and slumping down, eating and just sitting down, eating and lying down, not good. Eating and doing vigorous exercise, not good either. But after eating, a gentle walk has been shown to help blood sugar from being dysregulated. Interestingly, that was the research that was shown. Walking after a meal helps to prevent any dysregulation of blood sugar and will help to maintain blood flow to organs. But I'm not sure that's the line the person wanted. So I've just answered as far as I have understood from the question that was asked.
Could I answer that question, please?
Go ahead, brother.
No, some people say that you should bathe before you eat and not eat before you bathe. Is that something similar is involved there? Well, what are your views on
that? Let me make sure I hear that right.
Whether you should they claim that it is dangerous to bathe, to eat and then go to bathe. It should be done the other way around. You bathe first and then you go to eat. But that reminds me of the same question that was asked, something to do with the digestion.
That you should shower before eating rather than eat and then shower? That's what you mean?
Yes, yeah.
Yes. I can't say that I can comment on that right now. I have to look it up and see if there's anything to it. But I don't know. I don't know about that one. But thanks for raising it. I can research it. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I heard you mention vitamin D in connection with diabetes type 1. Does that mean that in children who have diabetes type 1, if they get an adequate amount of vitamin D, you think it will be able to decrease the amount of insulin they have to take at every meal?
Well, the thing is, let me put it this way. The development of type 1 diabetes is a complex process. First, there is the development of the autoantibodies, which will attack the beta islet cells of the pancreas and progressively destroy them. So the research is focusing on the fact that vitamin D would prevent that rather than waiting until it happens to try to use vitamin D as a reverser or a cure. If vitamin D is given early, it would prevent. Even in the process of the pathogenesis, it could mitigate, but not once the beta islet cells have been written off. No, you can't expect vitamin D to reverse really, but as a preventive. And even in this COVID pandemic, some researchers are showing that young children can take 1,000 units of vitamin D easily without any problem, because a lot of children, like a lot of adults, are vitamin D deficient and don't know. And then when in northern climes, winter comes in and there is no sunlight and they have to be in, that is a further lowering of vitamin D levels. So making sure that children have adequate vitamin D levels from very young. Breast milk, good source of vitamin D. If the mother is getting a good source of vitamin D from the sun or a supplement. So just as we tell women that make sure their folic acid level is adequate, women in the reproductive period, so if they get a baby during pregnancy, adequate folic acid levels, very good for the baby's spinal cord and brain. We also should tell women, make sure the vitamin D level is high enough that baby will get a good vitamin D in the uterus and from breast milk, and that vitamin D will help to prevent or certainly reduce the risk of diabetes type 1 and also multiple sclerosis as well. Okay, well, thank you. Let me just see if someone is asking if there's any relation between COVID and brain health. Yes, there's a relationship. The research is showing that now there can be a relation between COVID and anything in the body because of the inflammatory processes, the vascular processes, and certainly in the LONG, the long COVID, many organs, including the brain, can be affected, and they're seeing evidences of brain damage and cognitive decline in some post-COVID cases. So yes, hence the importance in all of these pandemics and so on to be thinking of keeping the brain and not every organ as good as order as possible. And so we mentioned all the things that will help protect the brain, and N-acetylcysteine, which protects lungs and liver and the immune system, would also safeguard the brain as well. Brother Odle, this will have to be our last question. Brother Odle?
Yes. Yeah, good afternoon, Doc. Good afternoon, brethren. Doc, here in Ghana, we have a lot of pumpkins, and they tend to throw away the seed, or to stop the people who buy them from growing pumpkins, the sellers tend to hold on to the seeds. But what form of the seed is better? In other words, when I buy pumpkins tomorrow and I get the seed, should I cook the seeds? Should I bake the seed? What is the best source of getting the substance, the healthy substance from the pumpkin?
Well, first of all, pumpkins are very good food. I was just reading an article of some Mediterranean peoples whose staple food is the lowly pumpkin, and they're a blue zone, living between 95 and 105, and they eat a lot of pumpkin and green leafy vegetables. Now, back to the seed. First of all, it's important to husk the seed, get that thick shell off, and then the seeds can be best eaten raw. Pumpkin seeds are delicious, eaten raw. Some people like to roast them, but all these seeds and nuts are best eaten raw and eaten eating pumpkin seeds raw. You can blend them in a smoothie, you can blend them and put them in bread, you can eat them raw, but they're excellent nutrition. So first of all, to get the husk of the little shell off, so you have the actual kernel inside, which is what we then call the seed that can be husk. And then you can use the pumpkin seed. But pumpkin seeds are excellent food. And if Ghana is producing a lot of pumpkins, they can look at also a mechanism to produce pumpkin seeds, which are all right, Brother Odle?
Yes, thanks very much.
Okay. All right, well, thank you. Our time is up, and I thank you very much for your audience and the important information we shared on protecting our brains in these times in which we live. Thank you very much. So over now to our sound leaders as we